I used to tell my stylist, just trim it for 20 years. And I watched myself get older in the mirror every single time she did. Not because of my face, because of my hair. Today I'm walking you through 5 specific haircuts that do the opposite. Cuts that soften your face, lift your features, and take real years off how people read your age at a glance. These aren't trendy. They're not going to make you look like you're trying too hard. They're the cuts that stylists reach for when they want a woman over 50 to walk out looking like herself, only sharper. I researched the best haircuts and the worst styling mistakes for women over 50, so you don't have to guess at your next appointment. If you haven't already, hit subscribe. I cover this every single week. Part 1, the long layered lob. Here's something most women don't realize until it's too late. Hair that hangs past your collarbone with no movement in it doesn't read as youthful, it reads as heavy. Not heavy in weight necessarily, heavy in gravity. It pulls your whole face downward with it. When you're younger, skin has enough natural elasticity to fight that pull. After 50, the pull wins, and every inch of length past your shoulders is quietly dragging your cheeks and jawline south with it. You've felt this. You've stood in front of the mirror after washing your hair, seen it hang flat and long, and thought you looked tired even though you'd slept fine. The fix is the long layered lob, a length that lands right around the collarbone, cut with layers that start at the cheekbone and build movement from there. Here's exactly what to say in the chair. I want a lob that hits my collarbone, with layers starting at my cheekbones so it moves instead of hanging flat. That phrase matters because lob alone can mean anything from a blunt cut to something shaggy, and you want your stylist thinking about movement specifically at the cheek and jaw area, which is where the lifting actually happens. What this cut does mechanically is simple but powerful. By removing weight starting at the cheekbone, you create layers that curve inward toward your face rather than hanging straight down past it. That inward curve acts almost like a frame. It draws the eye up toward your cheekbones and eyes instead of down toward your neck. Ask for face framing pieces that hit right at the jaw, slightly shorter than the rest, so they curl naturally toward your chin instead of falling flat against your neck. The result shows up the moment you leave the salon, and it's not subtle. People will start looking at your eyes and cheekbones in conversation instead of your neckline, because that's where the visual weight of your hair is now pointing. That's the whole game with layering at this length. You're not adding volume for volume's sake, you're redirecting attention upward, to the parts of your face that still hold the story of who you've always been. There's a maintenance side to this too, and it's easier than most women expect. A lob with face framing layers needs a trim every 8 to 10 weeks to keep the shape crisp, because layers grow out faster looking than a blunt cut does. The ends start to blend back together and the lift disappears first. Ask your stylist to keep the face framing pieces slightly shorter at each trim, even if you're not cutting much off the back. Picture the swap: long flat hair past the shoulders with a single blunt line at the bottom, versus a collarbone length lob with cheekbone layers that curve toward the jaw. Same woman, same face, but one drags the eye down and the other lifts it. And this next cut works on a completely different principle, because it's not about length at all. It's about something happening right at your part line that's been quietly working against you for years. Part 2, the soft side-swept bang. Most women avoid bangs entirely after 50 because they're terrified of looking like they're trying to hide something, or worse, like they're stuck in 1985. But here's what almost nobody tells you. A soft side-swept fringe that schemes diagonally across the forehead does something no other single-cut detail can do. It visually shortens the distance between your eyebrow and your hairline, which is exactly the area that lengthens as we age due to hair thinning at the temples, and a receding frontal hairline most women never talk about. You've probably noticed your forehead looking taller in photos than it used to. That's not your imagination. The fix here is precise, so bring this exact language to your next appointment. I want a soft side-swept fringe, cut on a diagonal, longest at the part and shortest above the outer eyebrow, blended so there's no harsh line. That diagonal cutting angle is the entire secret. A blunt, straight across bang reads instantly as artificial and dated at this stage of life, but a diagonal sweep that grows out of your natural part looks like hair that simply falls that way. Because in a sense, it does. Mechanically, this works because the diagonal line breaks up the vertical space of your forehead without creating a hard boundary. Your eye follows the diagonal down toward your brow bone, an eye area naturally, the way water follows a slope, instead of hitting a flat wall of bangs and stopping. This is also why length matters so much here. The fringe should be long enough to sweep to the side and tuck behind or blend into the rest of your style. Never short enough to stick out on its own as an obvious bang. The outcome is immediate, and it's specifically about your eyes. Once that diagonal line is in place, it acts like a soft arrow pointing straight at your eyes and brow bone, the most expressive and youthful reading part of any face. Women who add this fringe often say the compliments they get afterward are about their eyes specifically, not their hair. And that's the whole point, because the cut is engineered to disappear into the conversation while still doing its job. Maintenance-wise, this fringe needs the most frequent attention of anything on this list, a check-in every 4 to 6 weeks, because even a 1/4 inch of extra growth changes the angle of the sweep, and can make it start falling into your eyes instead of alongside them. Ask your stylist to dust just the fringe between full haircuts if you're not ready for a whole appointment. Most salons will do this as a quick, low-cost service. So picture it. A bare, lengthening forehead with hair pulled straight back, next to that same forehead softened by a diagonal fringe that sweeps toward the eyebrow. One shows every year at the hairline, the other hides it in plain sight. Now, the next haircut on this list isn't about the front of your head at all. It's about a single word stylists use behind the chair that most clients never hear. Part 3. The textured pixie with longer crown. There's a reason a flat, close-cropped pixie can accidentally age a woman, while a textured pixie with height at the crown does the exact opposite. And it comes down to something called vertical proportion. As we age, our faces naturally lose a small amount of volume and definition through the midface. A pixie cut sheared close and flat all over removes the one thing that was compensating for that, height above the head. And without it, the eye reads the face as shorter and rounder than it actually is. You've maybe seen this happen to a friend who went short and, despite loving the low maintenance factor, quietly wondered why it didn't look quite as sharp as she'd hoped. The correction is a textured pixie with deliberate length and lift left at the crown, cut short and close only at the sides and back. Say this exactly to your stylist. Keep the sides and back short and close, but leave 2 to 3 inches of length at the crown with texturizing, so I can style it up and forward. That crown length is not decorative, it's structural. It's what gives you the vertical lift that a flat pixie removes entirely. Here's the mechanism in plain terms. Height at the crown elongates the face vertically, which counteracts the natural softening and shortening that happens through the cheeks and jaw over time. It's the same principle a well-fitted blazer with structured shoulders uses on the body, creating a vertical line that makes everything below it look more lifted by comparison. Texturizing the crown pieces, rather than leaving them one blunt length, also means you can style them upward and slightly forward with your fingers and a small amount of product, rather than them just sitting flat under their own weight. The payoff here is dramatic for how sharp and current the whole haircut reads. A textured, lifted pixie says, "I chose this cut on purpose," in a way a flat one simply doesn't. And that intentionality is what other people clock, even if they couldn't tell you why. It's the difference between a haircut that happened to you and a haircut you're wearing. Maintenance is refreshingly simple on the cutting side. A trim every 4 weeks to keep the shortest parts crisp, but the daily styling matters more here than with any other cut on this list. Ask your stylist to show you, in the chair, exactly how much product to use and where, because a textured pixie lives or dies by that 90-second styling routine every morning. The swap is stark once you see it side by side. A flat, uniformly short pixie with no crown height, against a textured pixie with lift and length left on top, styled up and slightly forward. One flattens, the other elongates. And the next haircut on our list solves a problem that has nothing to do with length or height at all. It's about hair that's gone thin and started betraying you at the roots. Part 4. The root-lifted shoulder-length shag. If your hair has thinned even slightly at the crown, and for most women over 50 it has, a one-length shoulder cut is quietly working against you, because uniform length compresses hair flat against the scalp and puts all the visual emphasis exactly where you have the least density to spare. That's the part most women miss. It's not that thinner hair looks bad. It's that the wrong cut for thinning hair broadcasts the thinning instead of disguising it. You know the feeling of parting your hair in the morning and seeing more scalp than you remember seeing 5 years ago. The fix is a shag cut at shoulder length with heavy layering concentrated at the crown and top, cut specifically to lift the root. Bring this phrase in with you. I want a shag with the heaviest layering right at the crown, cut short enough there to stand up on its own once it's dry. That last part, stand up on its own, is the key detail most women leave out. And it's the difference between a shag that adds volume and one that just adds choppy ends without solving the actual problem. The reason this works comes down to hair weight distribution. When you remove length specifically at the crown while keeping the perimeter longer, the shorter crown pieces are lighter and spring away from the scalp instead of being weighed down by the full length of hair around them. That springing motion is what creates the appearance of root lift and density, even on hair that has genuinely thinned. It's an engineering solution to a volume problem, not a cosmetic one, and it works regardless of how much actual hair you have left at the root. What changes for you day to day is significant, because this is the cut that solves the flat by 10 a.m. problem so many women describe. Once the crown layers are cut correctly, root lift holds through the day with minimal product, because the structure is built into the cut itself rather than relying entirely on styling to fake it every morning. You stop fighting your hair and start working with what the cut is already doing for you. On maintenance, a shag needs a trim every 6 to 8 weeks to keep the crown layers from growing out and losing their spring. And ask your stylist to check the layering at the crown specifically at each visit, since that's the area doing the most work and the first place the effect fades as it grows out. Set them side by side and it's unmistakable. Flat, one-length shoulder hair with visible thinning at the crown, next to a shag with heavy crown layering that lifts and springs at the root. One shows every thinning strand, the other builds a structure around it. There's one haircut left on this list, and it might be the one that surprises you most, because it has nothing to do with cutting hair shorter at all. Part 5. The curved, rounded perimeter bob. Here's the one almost nobody talks about, and it's about the shape of the very bottom edge of your haircut, not the length. A blunt, straight across perimeter, the kind cut with a completely flat line across the back and sides, creates hard angles that echo and emphasize any squareness or heaviness along your jawline. Most women don't clock this consciously, but their eye does, and a flat-cut perimeter can make a jawline look more pronounced and angular than it actually is, adding a harshness that has nothing to do with your actual bone structure. The solution is a bob cut with a rounded, curved perimeter rather than a blunt straight line, where the ends curve gently inward toward the jaw and chin. Use this exact phrasing at your next appointment. Cut the perimeter with a rounded curve instead of a straight line, so the ends turn in toward my jaw rather than sitting flat. This single change to the cutting line, curved instead of straight, softens the entire lower half of the haircut without changing the length at all. The visual logic here is about echoing versus opposing lines. A straight, flat perimeter runs parallel to a strong jawline and reinforces it, making the jaw look even more defined and squared off. A curved perimeter does the opposite. It introduces a soft, rounded line that contrasts against the jaw instead of mirroring it. And that contrast is what reads as softening. Your stylist achieves this by cutting the ends on a slight upward angle at the back center, curving down and forward toward the face on both sides, rather than one continuous horizontal line. This is a subtle cut, but the effect on how your whole face reads is significant, because a rounded perimeter draws attention to the curve of your cheek, and the line of your jaw as a soft, unified shape rather than a series of hard angles. People tend to describe this look as softer, or gentler, without being able to point to exactly why, and that's because the change is happening in the geometry of the cut, not in anything obvious like color or length. For maintenance, this shape holds its softness for 6 to 8 weeks before the curve starts to relax and grow out into something closer to blunt again. Ask your stylist to re-establish the curve at each trim rather than just taking length off evenly, since an even trim on a curved perimeter can accidentally straighten the line back out over time. Line them up and the difference is unmistakable. A blunt, flat-cut bob that echoes every hard line in the jaw, next to a curved, rounded perimeter bob that softens that same jaw into something gentler and more approachable. 5 cuts, 5 completely different mechanisms, and every single one of them was sitting in your stylist's toolkit this whole time, waiting for the right words to bring it up. So now you've got 5 real, specific cuts: the layered lob that lifts your cheekbones, the side-swept fringe that shortens your forehead, the textured pixie that elongates your face, the root-lifted shag that solves thinning at the crown, and the curved bob that softens your jawline, and you know exactly what to say for each one in the chair. That's not luck, that's knowledge most women never get handed to them directly. Which one of these 5 surprised you the most? Or which one matches what you're already dealing with right now? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. Next week I'm breaking down the coloring mistakes that quietly age these exact same haircuts by 10 years. Like this video, subscribe to Timeless Wisdom Path, and I'll see you in the next one.